Hi there, I'm Mike Wheeler, the editor of Inside Waste, and welcome to the next episode of Beyond the Bin. Today, my guest is Dr. Nathan Webber, who is a Chancellor's Research Fellow at UTS and specialises in waste to energy emissions. Okay, welcome, Nathan, to the podcast.
Yes, so thank you for having me today. I'm excited to actually start talking a bit about energy from waste or waste energy, whatever you
Sure.
prefer.
I guess the first thing we'll just cover off on is your bona fides. You're a Dr. Chancellor Research Fellow at UTS. So, what's your specialty when it comes to energy from waste or waste?
Yes. So my expertise is in technically in thermal treatment broadly. So I have spent about the last 10 years looking at thermal treatment of contaminants. So making sure that what gets released out of something like a waste energy facility is safe and not going to cause more harm to the public. I spent 3 years doing my PhD at chemical engineering at University of Newcastle. I then spent 2 more years directly working with the United States Environmental Protection Agency as a Oak Ridge Institution of Science and Education's fellow. And I do apologize acronyms, but um, where I spent 2 years looking at predominantly working in the combustion mobile source, which is focused on air emissions and also on what goes into those facilities.
Excellent. Right. Now, waste to energy is pretty controversial. Probably not so much amongst the waste and recycling people, but the broader community. Um, there's been a recent paper coming out by the Smart Energy Council, which we've both seen. What are some of the common misconceptions about the type of waste to energy stuff?
Yeah.
Like what's the
So waste energy and really broadly in thermal treatment has always had some misconceptions, but since waste energy is the really big topical point right now we're having, I just mentioned just yesterday there was a major article written about some of its issues. But one of the biggest misconception is it really can cause further contamination to the public. So either from air emissions, water disposing, or even solids. That's probably the biggest one. And the moment any state or any regulatory community mentions it, you'll have an open conversation about it. But the reality of it is, with modern technologies, decades and decades from Europe and the US and even Asia using waste energy facilities, that a lot of those concerns of air emissions or pollution have really been removed from the question. The other one too, as well, which is commonly the two kind of other two questions, is CO2 emissions, and the third one really is it's not exactly a replacement for landfill. It kind of goes with landfill rather than a complete replacement. That's kind of the three misconceptions that kind of go.
So, in layman's terms, you'd rather put something in a waste to energy facility than bury it, I would imagine, as far as emissions. This report that came out sort of mentioned over time it might the waste to energy was better because it's got longer time. But what do you think? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so waste energy versus landfill is not kind of like an easy conversation to have. The landfills are necessary that we're going to have. There's going to be certain things that cannot even go to waste energy facility that can end up in a landfill. But the fact is, in a modern society, we are looking to recirculate all our material. We don't want to waste things. Where waste energy is from its name is we're recovering a lot of that landfill waste that goes directly like plastics, paper, wood, timber. That actively goes to landfill that could be readily used as energy recovery at a facility, which is something that report didn't overly talk about. They're more focused on the emissions comparatively between the two of them, which isn't quite not a clean comparison either, because they only compared CO2 to CO2. One thing that wasn't made clear about it is contaminants as well. Other contaminants. Landfills take a lot of contaminants. While there are strong arguments showing that waste to energy can actively remove and destroy some of those contaminants. There's plenty of examples, and I'm happy to talk more about it. But one, it's been shown that, for example, one of the expertise areas that I focused a lot on is on PFAS substances, which is quite a notorious emerging contaminant that shows that having them in landfill, they leach out and get into drinking water. But while actively sending them to a waste energy facility, you actually can remove the concentration of them. And there's another part of it as well, is that waste energy facilities tend to come under significantly more scrutiny from regulatory communities. So waste energy facilities, you'll capture all your solids and liquids. You'll do significant testing from them, meaning the only real major emission you have is coming from air, which is highly controlled now. So you always
Well, can
monitor.
we just stop there just for a minute
Yes,
on
sorry.
the air, because that's your
Yes.
emissions is one of your
Yes, it is.
specialist subjects. So, what difference would say compared to a coal-fired power station or from a waste to energy plant? What are the different comparisons to them in terms of what they emit?
Yeah, and this is a great question because this is where waste energy has the biggest problem for it. Coal-fired power plants only take coal, so they have one controlled substance. Waste energy facilities will take every waste that has any high energy value on it, so it's a lot harder to control at waste energy facilities. Uh, they would love to have perfect control of all their waste, but reality of it, they're going to take a facility will take any substance they can. The big difference of it is that a facility will make sure that the temperatures in the control system are always at a certain high enough temperature to make sure all those compounds are breaking down to what the basic compounds are. While a coal-fired power plant is targeting energy recovery, so they've really heavily focused on energy. But while waste to energy facility focuses on both the recovery, destruction, and energy recovery, so it's kind of got that mixed world. And that's why when we see that report which came out recently, which tried to compare waste energy to things like solar, it's not a clean comparison because waste energy also focuses on making sure all that waste is not going to be re-emitted back into the environment.
So, can you do you have any numbers on you? Like, can you tell me like how much CO2 a coal-fired power station, sorry, is putting in the air compared to a waste-to-energy facility? Like,
So the waste energy is significantly smaller. So that's the first big thing. So waste energy, if we say Australia goes down the full waste energy pathway, it will account for 2% of the energy. On a rule of thumb for a waste energy facility, 1 ton of waste equals 1 ton of CO2. It's just a simple comparison. But when we talk coal-fired power plant, it's it's pure carbon, similar principle, nearly 1-to-1 ratio, but the fact is they're significantly higher scaled. And coal also, and I'm not being negative against coal, but it does require mining, etc., to pull it up, which also you could argue has its own CO2 emissions. While waste energy is a source that is actively being produced in Australia, so it has to go somewhere, either to landfill or to either gets recycled, reused, or to landfill currently in most of Australia, except for obviously the one facility in WA.
And I guess you talk about getting permits. I mean, the one out in Western Australia took about 10 years to build because of the community concerns, government concerns, a bit of a political football, I feel. Would that be a fair comment?
Yes, definitely. The regulatory community in Australia, and I have talked to regulators over especially landfill regulators, over what would take to get it across the line, and there are always a lot of landmines that they step on, like the public concerns, the fact that it's going to cost a significant investment, and then you also have to reroute your landfill to it, which is obviously its own has major issues because then you could be moving trucks through local areas, etc. And the concerns are right from the regulatory community, but how long it takes in Australia is a bit of quite a large red flag, is an issue for the country because, again, Europe and US have been doing this for decades. We're not going from zero experience. We have, even in Australia itself, we have experienced thermal treatment, people who understand the technology. And even the WA one, if you look at the report, they were significantly helped from the overseas. And the WA government specifically uses the EU regulations. So it's not like they're going in blind. So taking 10 years is a frustrating process, which could be very much expedited. And hopefully the WA one has expedited that for the other states.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, hopefully.
But yeah, there's been, so running out of landfills, apparently. Again, that report said we could open some more if we wanted to,
Yes.
but I don't know how you could probably do that. But so let's say we don't do waste to energy plants. So what would we do instead of? It's just business as usual, or
Yeah, so if you don't open waste energy, you're gonna have to. I know this was last podcast as well of talking about this openly, which it was great to hear the points on it. Is that you either increase the size of landfills, which has its own major concerns, or we start as a country start considering how do we send our waste back overseas, which again is a separate whole horrible mess. So the reality of it is it's kind of getting to that kind of kind of to that point of where we have to make a decision if we want to actively use this technology, or do we want to keep using landfills? Because the other options of technology either aren't full-scale processes that would going to take small amounts, or are much worse for the environment, which I won't mention those ones.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, I know we keep going back to the report because it's fresh in our mind and it's
Yes.
new, but it was, I felt it was kind of a bit slanted, but because Smart Energy Council got their own
Yes.
uh,
Agenda.
barrow to pull. But I was just wondering to push, should I say? But I was just wondering, when I was reading it, they were talking about some of the old facilities using waste to energy facilities, like old food manufacturing plants. But that's a different type of technology, right?
Yes.
The one they're talking about.
Yes, they're talking about a bit of an old school idea that instead of recovering the energy, you're more just destroying the waste going into it. So it's more of a municipal waste combustor or municipal waste incinerator rather than actual targeting energy recovery. That's where, for example, not to mention they're also much smaller scale. They take a lot less high energy values. It's
It was almost like, to me, like the old incinerator at the backyard, almost to it, not, just smoke going up in the air.
Yes, and you'll hear this argument every single time, like bringing that back, the small backyard ones that are actively not controlled. But if waste energy was, established let's say for example New South Wales in the next couple of months, it would go under rigorous testing, and that's the whole point of the regulatory community, and they would go through that process. Those smaller ones haven't gone through that extensive because they kind of can slip under the regulatory process.
Yeah, and those regulations aren't helped by each state having their own regulations. And that's, I mean, look, I know of at least two major recycling companies or waste companies, or what you call them, that are very keen to build these plants, and a couple of have been knocked back. But it's almost, why would you? Because the more the cost than anything. I know you got regulations, but they are not cheap to build at all.
No, they're not. The fact you got to put in, because we don't have an established. It's not like they're taking over a already established thermal treatment facility or municipal waste combustor or waste energy facility. They've got to build them from scratch, which is a massive cost. But reality of it, some of those companies have established hundreds throughout the world, so they're not coming. They have the capital ready to spend, and they will likely make a significant amount of money from it. For example, they make their most money not from energy recovery, but actually taking the waste on board, which is their kind of that variations. But yes, keep getting knocked back because they're spending resources already to try to get these approved, and then getting consistently knocked back is a kind of a bit of a roadblock for them.
I was looking at the cost of the one out Western Australia, Kohana, and I was thinking, how are they going to get a return on investment on that? But you just said they make money out of it, so
Yes. I was surprised to see the values of the Western Australia one too.
yeah.
But I think over time, because these facilities aren't, they're usually designed to last well over 30 years.
Yeah.
And the assumption is, and it's not a bad assumption to make at the moment, is that landfill is going to get pulled back, less landfill, meaning that they're going to actively take on more waste up to their full capacity. And I imagine when they're at full capacity, they'll probably be at profit at a certain amount of years. I don't know the exact values. And not to mention them, one of the biggest costs for a waste energy facility is actively keeping if a facility turns off, the flame or the fire turns off with it, which produces the energy. The longer that runs consistently, the cheaper it becomes to run that facility.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, sort of out loud, if you were the industry, what are some of the things you'd be proactively doing to try and turn the corner in terms of public perception and how people see it?
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting point because the companies are actively doing this, especially from the contamination space, because they're not really worried about they're not worried about the energy recovery and stuff like that. That's a really well established technology that's done by coal, gas, turning turbines, but they're trying to change the perception of that these will cause public health issues. For example, I know the fact that Veolia is investing a significant amount of money into their research side of things that are actively trying to show the public, look, if this substance goes through it, it's going to come out nice and clean. They actually have a major field study down in Victoria coming up very soon that's actively trying to show that some of these contaminants from it's solar thermal desorption plant, not energy to waste, but again, showing investment in the country before it's even established is a positive side. So yeah, that's kind of where I would see it going. Is you actively try to research, you try to stay ahead of the curve, because a lot of facilities over time have been waited for. waited for the regulator to tell them they've done it wrong, and then it's too late. The public health's already been exposed to numerous chemicals. But now these companies now are actually trying to stay ahead of that curve to get the regulator much happier and get on top of these perceptions.
I suppose like an extreme example would be asbestos, I guess. Back in the day, great for putting on buildings and insulation and whoops.
Yeah, a perfect example. Yeah, still a problem today, but yes, asbestos is a good example. PFAS is another great example. We're still actively using it. Dioxins is the big thermal treatment one, if you ever heard of those before.
No, I haven't. What are they, sorry?
Dioxins. They are a very hazardous chemical that comes out of thermal treatment facilities. That was the big innovation between the 80s and 90s, and why thermal treatment had a bit of a step back in Australia, because they had problems with them forming. But now we have improved the technology to prevent those from forming. Now, so the technology is much safer.
Are Australians, and I'm talking about the public, are Australians more skeptical, cynical? I mean, a lot of these, you've rightly said, a lot of these technologies are already proven in places like America and Europe, which are much more, as far as populations, more condensed, more packed. They've got these, I mean, I know there's one such facility, I think, in the middle of London or North London. So why are we, what's the problem? I mean, what's the...
So I wouldn't call Australians, every person has a right to be critical. To be honest, I find Australians read a lot more and actively engage with the media. I find that media actually provides a lot more information. Not always positive, not always negative. It's kind of gives that variation. It does come from a historical point of view. Like, Australia has made mistakes in these technologies before, which has brought regulation in to help with this, which is kind of, 80s and 90s weren't that long ago where these technologies were making mistakes. But it has well improved beyond that point. Like, even over the last 10 years alone, it has moved on from it's all about capturing what's coming out now, rather than just worrying about what goes in, which is a big change in the perspective, because it shows that if we monitor the waste coming out, we can actually prevent any contamination relieving it.
Yeah, I guess the other side of it, talk about contaminations, and you can, how much that puts into the air or whatever it does. But I think you and I discussed just before this podcast started, that we kind of get the public's concern in like property values. Like, if you said to me your house is worth 150 grand, and you built a facility next to mine and it's still worth 150 grand, I'd be fine. But it's not. It's going to go down in price whether you want to. So you can sort of get that side of it. But the actual technology itself is pretty sound as far as these days.
Yes, of course. The technology won't. If the technology is, and I should make this very clear, done correctly, not every waste energy facility is equal. If we do it to the top quality, get the regulatory community actually and the local community involved with it as the technology evolves as well. I don't know, evolve. Sorry, it's a bit of a.
Yeah.
It's important to make sure that they keep an eye on technology. Keep an eye, make sure that we're staying well ahead of how it goes. Like, honestly, the only emission that comes out of a waste energy facility should be CO2, carbon dioxide, which in itself has its own question marks over it, but it's not a hazard, so it won't impact your property. Okay, there won't be. So I know some coal-fired power plants actively have soot and solids form on properties around the area. That happens occasionally.
Yeah, what form?
Type of solids, soot and stuff like that, carbon
Oh,
dust.
soot. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Sorry. While waste energy, you could even argue, cleans the air better than you're actually breathing currently.
Really?
Yeah, it's done correctly. It's well monitored. It's quite high temperatures. What's coming out of that is, like I said, just mostly CO2. Your own car pollutants can produce worse gases than some waste energy facilities can.
Yeah. All right. To start to wind up a bit, but I guess my final question I always ask guests on the podcast is: if Nathan ruled the world, what are a couple of things you'd like to see that could help? And I'm not even talking about actually. Do you think would help with the perception of waste to energy?
Yeah. So I think the first big one, and it still frustrates me a little bit in Australia, is actively being able to find community information. Like, I was trying to find information about what temperatures the Western Australia waste energy facility runs at, and it's not easy to find. I think that's the first thing I would really change, is have information publicly accessible a little bit easier. Some of these EPA websites are a little dated and could use a bit of an update to be able to search.
The Western Australian one, could I know that?
Yes, could use it. And on that point, actually, AI has actually helped with that. You can ask, whatever AI machine you have to search for these critical information. I would make sure if it's actually real information first, but it tends to do a decent job today. The second perspective I would really try to push is try to involve the research community more. Australia is actually surprisingly really forward thinking when it comes to thermal treatment and waste energy or whatever technology you have. Is that we have about 3 or 4 groups that are world leaders in this. For example, you have the CSIRO with Jens Boulevard School. I do apologize, Jens, about pronouncing the last name wrong there. And Winchao Lu down there. You got my group with Eric Kennedy and Michael Stocktonhuber, UTS. And then you got, like I mentioned, commercial companies that are actively being involved with the research community. Problem is, when the research is, we're doing quite good research, the regulatory community doesn't always request information from that to get advice. So it'd be quite nice to have some bit of transparency between, the 3 magic facilities, like your research, industry, and your regulatory community. It'd be kind of nice to have an open triangle about that. And that's what Europe and US do a little better than us, is that they have that actively involved. Which is something I saw very impressive. It's extremely hard to do it because you're working a bit of tightrope. You don't want to cause too much issues for the industry, but you also don't want to under-regulate because then you expose public health. And you don't, that's where the research comes in, where it kind of shows you the directions you should be going. That's the kind of direction I would like to see the field going. Although I must say I am a little biased because I am a researcher myself.
Yeah, I was just, but what you're saying is collaboration, and better collaboration, and that's probably a theme for the waste industry, and the recycling industry for quite a while.
Yes, and I've worked with you guys before, and they're working in the waste industry has, they've always got great thoughts. And to be honest, they're usually quite a far ahead of me. Like, they occasionally come up with ideas. Have you thought of this? And I'm like, no, I didn't. And it's a great way to collaborate.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dr. Nathan Weaver, for your time today. Really enjoyed your conversations, and hopefully you'll spark some debate and hopefully make people a bit more aware of what waste facilities can do.
Yes,
waste to energy facilities. Should I
yes,
say.
yes. No, thank you for having me. I'm hoping that, and if anybody's out there who wants to ask more questions, feel free to reach out, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people in the industry that would be grateful to do this as well. It's a lot of misinformation out there, but reality of it is waste to energy has improved significantly over the last 10 years. But it's an involving technology that Australia should be more involved with.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay.
Thank you for your time today. And remember, it's not rubbish. It's a resource that can be repurposed. See you next time.